Hey everyone, welcome or welcome back. My name is Justin, and this is Dad Discovers, where I'm learning about the world through YouTube. Today we're checking out a video that may be a bit controversial if Americans see it, maybe. It's titled The American Dream Died and Moved to Australia. Not really sure how to take that yet or exactly what this is going to be about, but let's jump in and check it out.
In December 2024, the OECD released its latest Better Life Index rankings. For the first time in modern history, Australia now outperforms the United States across 7 of 11 quality of life metrics. This wasn't a marginal shift. The gap in household wealth, life expectancy, and social mobility has widened dramatically over the past 15 years. What was once called the American dream, the belief that hard work guarantees upward mobility, is now statistically more achievable in Australia than in the country that invented the phrase.
Yeah, I don't know about it on the Australian side, but definitely here, the American dream, as he described it, it definitely feels dead. Because so many people have to work, 2 and 3 jobs just to pay your bills. And that's not even, money for vacation or anything.
If you're an Australian, this matters for 3 reasons. First, it affects your superannuation. Global capital is beginning to recognize Australia as a stable, high-growth destination, which means your retirement savings are tied to how the world perceives this shift. Second, it changes our immigration dynamics. Skilled workers are choosing Melbourne and Sydney over New York and San Francisco. That reshapes our housing markets, our wages, and our political debates. Third, it alters our national identity. For decades, we've benchmarked ourselves against America. If that benchmark is failing, we need to understand why, and what replaces it. In this video, we'll examine 3 things. First, how we got here. The policy decisions made between 2008 and 2024 that created this divergence. Second, what the numbers actually reveal. Not opinion, data on wealth, health, education, and opportunity. And finally, what this means for Australia going into 2026 and beyond. Let's begin. To understand today's situation, we need to briefly go back to 2008. The global financial crisis hit both countries hard, but the responses were fundamentally different. Australia maintained its compulsory superannuation system. It expanded skilled migration. And critically, it avoided a full-scale banking collapse through swift regulatory intervention. The United States.
Did you guys do the same thing that we did where your government bailed out like all of the big banks? Or was that even like the issue in Australia during that time?
States, by contrast, entered a decade of wage stagnation, student debt accumulation, and healthcare cost inflation. Between 2008 and 2020,
Definitely.
the median American household saw real income grow by just 3%. The median Australian household? 14%. Now, some of that is mining. That's fair. But not all of it. Because even Australians in service industries, teachers, nurses, tradespeople, maintained purchasing power while their American counterparts lost ground. Here's the part most people miss.
Yeah, because here, I remember during that time, like everybody stopped buying stuff. You only bought what you needed.
It wasn't just about wealth. It was about systems. Australia's universal healthcare kept medical bankruptcy off the table. Our tertiary education, while expensive, remained capped and subsidized compared to the unchecked explosion of US college debt. And our superannuation model, mandatory, employer-funded, compounding over decades, created a baseline of financial security that most Americans never access.
Right.
By 2020,
sure.
The average Australian retiree had more wealth than the average American retiree, despite the US having a larger economy. That's not luck. That's infrastructure. Now let me show you what the numbers actually say.
That's most of our infrastructure. It's just, it seems backwards. It seems outdated. It's not funded. it just seems like everything's falling apart, all the way from physical infrastructure like roadways to the way that everything's put together. It doesn't seem like it's working anymore.
Want you to look closely at this. In 2023, median household wealth in Australia reached approximately 483,000 US dollars. In the United States, it was 106,000. That's a 4-to-1 ratio, and it's been widening since 2015. Life expectancy tells a similar story. Australians now live, on average, 83.9 years. Americans? 76.4. That's a 7-year gap. In developed nations, that's
Why'd they have to show the skeleton for America?
enormous. What's unusual here is that America isn't a poor country. It's the wealthiest nation on Earth by GDP. But that wealth is concentrated at the top in ways that Australia, for all its inequality, has managed to avoid. Let's talk about social mobility, the ability of someone born into a lower-income household to rise into the middle or upper class. Australia ranks 8th in the OECD. The United States ranks 27th. That means a child born into poverty in Melbourne has a statistically better chance of attending university, owning a home, and retiring comfortably than a child born into poverty in Detroit or Dallas. This is the part most headlines miss. The American dream didn't die because of laziness or entitlement. It died because the structural systems that once supported it, affordable housing, accessible education, employer-sponsored pensions, eroded faster than they could be replaced. Australia, meanwhile, doubled down on those systems. Not perfectly, not without flaws, but consistently. So what happens next? Let's think through the second and third order effects. If skilled workers continue choosing Australia over America, that accelerates our brain gain and their brain drain. That's already visible in tech and finance. Engineers and analysts who once moved to Silicon Valley are now staying in Sydney or relocating from California. This puts upward pressure on Australian housing markets. It raises wages in competitive sectors. And it creates political tension around immigration policy. But it also strengthens our tax base and our innovation capacity. On the American side, the consequences are more complex. If the US continues losing its reputation as the land of opportunity, it loses a core pillar of its soft power. For decades, American exceptionalism was tied to economic mobility. If that narrative collapses, what replaces it? Here's where geopolitics enters. China has been watching this closely. Beijing understands that Australia's stability, our superannuation system, our healthcare, our quality of life, makes us a competitor for global talent. That's why you've seen increased Chinese investment in Australian infrastructure, universities, and property. Not just for returns, for influence. If Australia continues outperforming the US in human capital metrics, we become a more attractive partner for middle powers across Asia and the Pacific. That gives us leverage, but it also makes us a target. Now let's consider the alternative scenario. What if the United States reverses course? If Washington implements universal healthcare, if it caps university tuition, if it revives mandatory employer pensions, then the American dream could resurge. That would pull...
Yeah, maybe. But I could never see those happening, especially all three of those. Those are too big of business here. Like, both sides, of our political parties, I just don't think either side would go for it. Maybe, to some degree on some of them, but not like other nations like Australia and the UK and Canada. I don't see it.
Capital and talent back. And it would force Australia to compete on merit, not by default. But as of 2025, there's no political consensus in America to make those changes. Which means, for the foreseeable future, Australia holds the advantage. So where does that leave us? 3 truths emerge. First, Australia's structural advantages are real. Our compulsory superannuation, our universal healthcare, and our managed immigration system have created measurable prosperity that the United States has struggled to match. Second, this shift is not guaranteed to last. If we become complacent, if we allow housing unaffordability to spiral, if we fail to invest in education and infrastructure, then our advantage erodes. Third,
Right.
the world is noticing.
Which I feel like is what happened here. We went through that, and now it's, and we didn't even go through it as good as other countries are, but the, I guess, the perception of being one of the richest countries, but now that's, I don't even know what to think about it anymore. I just think today's a disaster for the US.
For better or worse, Australia is now positioned as a model of developed world stability. That brings opportunity, but it also brings scrutiny. Here's the question I'll leave you with. Does this shift represent a genuine transformation in global standards of living, or is it simply evidence that America's post-war dominance is ending, and Australia is temporarily filling a vacuum? I don't have a definitive answer, but I think it's worth serious debate. If this concerns you, or if you want to understand how this affects our relationship with China, I strongly recommend watching my analysis on Australia's resource dependence.
Yeah, that was interesting. I would say most of, if not everything, that he said about the US, pretty much agree with. I can't say for sure about the Australian stuff, but that's not quite where I thought that video was going to go. I thought it was going to go more about the American dream of, buying a house is dead, so people are moving to Australia. But he was just kind of comparing economy to economy, which is interesting to see. But yeah, interesting for sure. But yeah, that was fun. Thank you for checking this out with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.